Hello world, Noah here, and welcome back to Python one-liner tips and tricks. In this video, we're going to be talking about a special use of the OR keyword. You're probably used to using the OR keyword in a compound condition, so maybe you have an if statement and you would say if condition A is true or condition B is true. But there's actually another use of the OR keyword that's really useful for one-liners, and so let's take a look at it now. Here's a problem that demonstrates this really well, very simple problem. And then on the left, I have a multi-line, sort of standard solution. And then on the right side, we're going to actually implement the solution ourselves. And so here's the problem. Implement a function that reads a line of input and echoes it back. So the user types something in, and we should print out whatever they typed in. But if there's no input, if the user doesn't type anything in, we should print the string silence instead. So if I type in hello, it should say hello, goodbye, it should say goodbye. But if I type nothing and I just hit enter, it should say silence instead. And so if we look at the code on the left, we have this simple function. It gets a line of user's input, and it says if the line is an empty string, we print silence. Otherwise, we print out the line, right? So very straightforward. But can we actually solve this problem in one line? And the answer is yes. And so in every video when I ask that question, the answer is always going to be yes. I'll give you a spoiler there. But here's the idea. We can make a couple of observations about the original function, and then we can figure out how to do it in one line. And the most important observation that you have to make for this involves the concept of truthiness. And I'm going to have a video about this eventually. If you're watching this when it comes out, that video probably won't be up, but if you're watching it in the future, it probably will be. And so I'm not going to take too much time to explain it, but basically the idea is that in Python, you can treat any value as if it's true or false. And most values are going to be considered true, but some values are going to be considered false. And so, we call these values that are considered false, we call them falsy. And so some examples include the number 0, an empty list, and an empty string. And there's other ones as well. And of course, false itself, the keyword false is falsy. And there's other examples as well. But basically, falsy means that if you were to use this value in a condition directly, it would be considered false. And so what you'll notice is right over here, we're working with an empty string. Right, and maybe it's not clear from the typing, but there's not a space in that string. It's just an empty string. And so as we know that an empty string is falsy, and I'll tell you also that any other string is going to be truthy. So as long as there's any amount of characters in the string, it'll be truthy. But in this case, it's an empty string, so it's falsy. And so we can rewrite this condition a little bit, in order to make it so that it is it's a little bit simpler. And so what we could do is if we get rid of this right here, and the condition is just if line, right? Then if line is an empty string, this condition would be false. So empty means false, and otherwise it would be true, right? So that's an important thing. And so what we can do is we can say right now we're saying if there's anything in the string, we'd print silence, and otherwise we print out the line, which is the opposite of what we want. And so what we could do is we could just add a not right there. So if not line, which is the same thing as saying if the line is an empty string, right? So that's the idea. And so once we notice this, then we can apply a special rule for using the OR keyword. And what the OR keyword will do is it'll let us write something like this, A or B. And let's just say something like X equals A or B, for example. And so what will happen is that if A is truthy, then X will be set to A. But if A is falsy, then X will be set to B. So when I say X equals A, it's the same thing as saying X is equal to A if A is truthy and B otherwise, right? So that's basically what that OR does. It says if the value to its left is falsy, then it'll use the value to its right. And so that's basically what we want to do here. We want to say we want to echo back the user's input, but if it's an empty string, aka if it's falsy, then we just want to print out the word silence instead. And so, now we can actually try and solve it. And I'm going to first solve it in multiple lines, and then it's going to be very, very easy to collapse it down into a single line. So again, let's get the user's input. So line is equal to input. And then we can do something like the answer is equal to, and it would be line, sorry, not if. It would be line or the string silence, like that. And so again, if line is truthy, aka if line is not an empty string, then answer will be set equal to line. But if line is an empty string, then answer will be set equal to silence. And then the last thing we have to do is we have to print the answer. So that's it. And right now it's 3 lines, but we'll very easily turn it into a single line. But it does the exact same thing as the left-hand side. And so to change it into 1 line, the first thing we can do is, we have this variable called line here, and we're only using it 1 time. So we can basically do what's called inlining that variable. So we take this variable line, which is equal to input, let's get rid of it, and instead of referencing this variable line, we can just reference its value directly. So like that, and I'll move that over. So answer is equal to input or silence. And it's the exact same code as we had before. We just removed one of the lines. So basically, it'll still ask the user for input, and if it's truthy, that will be the answer. If it's falsy, silence will be the answer. Same thing. And then the last thing is we do the same variable inlining thing again. We say, here's this variable called ans for answer, and we only use it 1 time. And so we can take the value, which is this whole thing, and just stick it right inside of that print statement. And so I'm going to erase this and rewrite it in a single line. And so we're going to print input or silence. And that is our 1-liner right there. So again, it's first going to get the user's input, and if it's truthy, then this entire expression will be equal to the input. But if it's falsy, then the entire expression will be equal to silence. And then all we're doing is we're printing the result. So it'll either print what the user inputted, or it'll print out silence. And so you can run this code on your computer if you'd like, and you'll see that it happens to work. But we've now gotten it down to 1 line, and there's no semicolons and there's no blocks. This entire thing is a single expression, and so therefore we have solved this in 1 line. And so basically the trick with this is you have to look out, if you have an if and an else, and it involves, if something is truthy or not, then you can probably use or. So you can basically look out, it's great for a situation like that. It's great for a situation that involves sort of a default value. So here we said it's the user's input or silence if they didn't do anything. So it's good for default values in that case as well. And the last thing I'll say is that the truthiness part may not be super obvious, because the original condition was if the line is equal to an empty string. And so you have to notice that, an empty string is falsy and any other string is truthy, and then you can make that switch. So it's not always super obvious, but this is a good tool if you know how to use it. And so that's all for this one. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.